Hello learners, welcome back to the course on learning and development in organization. We move to the last lecture of module 10 where we'll be looking into diagnostic questionnaires for learning interventions. So if you have looked into the previous few lectures and sessions, you would actually come across different types of measurement devices, questionnaires, scales, assessment tools. All these aspects were critically with respect to the manager, senior manager, and then the person who is in charge of a particular unit or group, organization as such. Now, we'll look into the learning interventions. Are the learning interventions that are being done or taken up in an organization, are they good enough? Are those learning interventions effective? Are those learning interventions actually valid? Validity means serving the purpose what it is supposed to do. So this will be our point of discussion today, diagnostic questionnaires for learning interventions. I am Dr. Abraham Cyril Issac. I am an assistant professor at the School of Business, Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati. Now when you look into the diagnostic questionnaire specifically with respect to the learning intervention, today's theme would be what gets measured gets managed. I have given different forms of this across the different modules. I've already told that something which we cannot measure, we cannot improve. So what gets measured gets managed. If you want to actually improve something, if we want to actually develop something, we need to have a clear measure. That measure will make us understand where do we stand, what are the ways to go forward, or how much we have to travel forward. This is what the essence of today's discussion would be. Now let's start with understanding the importance of accurate diagnosis in learning and development. Many a time what has happened that most of the organizations take up some learning and development activities, or the L&D vertical is being raised, and as part of the competition within the industry, your organization feels insecure, fear of missing out, FOMO, they will just jump in and they'll try to bring in some random learning and development initiatives, and then it may totally fail. So this has happened quite a few times in many of the organizations. That is why to measure, to understand the learning interventions, how effective they are, that need has come up. And that is why we start with understanding the importance of accurate diagnosis in learning and development. So if you look into today's fast-paced world, digitally evolving workplace, we need to understand that organizations are under increasing pressure to ensure that every single learning and development program yields measurable outcomes. The moment we see some abstract program coming in and we are not getting the desired results, or we are not getting an understanding of what exactly is the outcome, then that program will be termed as a failure. Whatever be the top-notch trainers you bring in, or whoever be the people who are trying to run the show, that program will eventually fail because the measurement is not proper. So we'll discuss more on the importance of accurate diagnosis in learning and development. So when you look into this particular topic of intervention specifically, central to achieving this is the ability to accurately diagnose the learning needs, the skill gaps, and the development opportunities specifically. So without a proper diagnosis, even the most well-designed learning interventions may miss their mark, leading to wasted resources and disengaged learners. So as management thinker Peter Drucker has aptly noted, and that's the theme of today's session, what gets measured gets managed. So this timeless insight underscores the foundational role of measurement and analysis in driving effective learning strategies. So in the context of L&D, this means that before organizations can manage talent development successfully, they must first be able to assess and measure where learning is truly needed. So let's look into the role of the diagnostic questionnaires now. If we understand one of the most accessible, and if we look into the diagnostic questionnaires, one of the most accessible and versatile tools in this process is typically the way to understand the effectiveness or the way to question the effectiveness of this training program. And that is why we have this diagnostic questionnaire. Now, these structured instruments, if you ask me, when they are well designed and when they are strategically deployed, they offer a range of benefits that support evidence-based decision making in learning and development. Specifically, the diagnostic questionnaires help in identifying the learning needs. That will be the first point of today's discussion. Questionnaires typically can uncover areas, where employees lack knowledge, confidence, or even clarity. So, it can be any domain critical to the current and future performance. So, wherever you look into the need gap analysis, the learning need requirement, these are the typical areas. So, they provide direct insights into the learner's perspective on what they need to grow and succeed in their role. So, the way forward, that is what is typically analyzed in the learning needs. So, diagnostic questionnaires categorically help in identifying the learning needs. Second important aspect which they help in identifying would be the skill gaps. Now, understanding learning needs is one factor, skill gaps is another aspect. By comparing responses to competency benchmarks, or let's say some of the role expectations that you have within a particular job role, questionnaires typically help detect specific skill deficits. So, you look into the questionnaires, you will see that there can be a certain job role expectations, or there can be some benchmark associated with the competency. So, all these aspects will give us a cue into the skill gap. So, this typically enables targeted interventions that close the gap between the current capability and the desired proficiency, aligning learning efforts with the organizational goals. So, this is vital when you look into the skill gaps. Another important aspect which is taken care of by the diagnostic questionnaire especially is behavioral pattern. When you look into the behavioral patterns as such, you will see that by looking into the patterns that are executed or found in an organization beyond the technical skills, these diagnostic tools will help us to explore attitudinal and behavioral dimensions such as communication styles, leadership approaches, or adaptability to change, etc. So, when you talk about the behavioral patterns, we have to talk about the essence of attitude and behavior. This has been categorically well discussed in the organizational behavior course in NPTEL platform itself. But just pause for a moment and think, is behavior same as attitude, or is attitude an antecedent of behavior? When you look into your counterparts or your colleagues or your co-employees, all these individuals specifically have a certain attitude. What is attitude? Can attitude be only with respect to or directed towards an individual, or can attitude be some function that is also applicable to a particular object? Just think about it. You might have a particular attitude towards, let's say, a typical chair or a typical food item, or you might have a certain attitude towards a set of people or a person. So, attitude can be towards both. When you look into this definition of attitude from a textbook, you will see that it's a learned process. So, what is important with respect to learned is that it can be unlearned, it can be relearned. And when you are looking into enduring process, it means that I generally take this example in my classroom also when I take the behavioral aspects of the organizational behavior generally. You have taken whatever be your age be, let that age be X years. So, let's say you have all put up some dress, some particular clothes are there in your body. So, if it has taken you to put the dress X years, that is a timeline, that is a time that was required for you to put your dress, let's say X years, which is equal to your age. Then if somebody comes and tells you change your dress or change your outfit, will it be easy for you to change it? It will not be. So, attitude change is not impossible, but yes, it is difficult. So we have to always relook at all those training programs, attitude retraining and all. There are possibilities, there are aspects like systematic desensitization, which we generally use with respect to change in attitude, but that said, how effective they are, it all depends on the experimental setup. So when we look into the diagnostic questionnaire, it not only looks into the behavior, it also looks into the attitude. Now attitude will lead to the behavioral tendency and finally to the behavior. So this is the beauty of the diagnostic questionnaire, which also looks into the behavioral patterns. Coming back to our discussion, when we look into the dimensions such as communication styles or leadership approaches or adaptability to change, all these aspects typically give us the behavioral patterns. So these patterns, if you ask me, they are vital for designing soft skill or behavioral training that address underlying mindsets. Now let's look into some other aspects which also are influenced by or can be obtained or understood by the diagnostic questionnaire, the training readiness. Please note, not all employees are equally ready or motivated to learn. When you are looking into the aspects of readiness, we have also discussed in the previous session, if you recollect, that the change in technology, there's always a resistance. The change in organizational structuring, there's always a resistance. So resistance or inertia is a fact. Questionnaires can assess learner motivation, it can assess prior experience, it can assess learning styles, it can assess perceived barriers also, helping learning and development teams to customize content and delivery methods that boost engagement and retention. Another significant aspect which, if you ask me, the diagnostic questionnaires help in identifying is organizational learning culture. Now this is important. This is not just organization culture, this is organizational learning culture. Finally, questionnaires can actually serve a broader function by evaluating the learning climate within the organization. So are employees encouraged to take risk or learn from the failure? That is a big question. Do leaders model continuous learning? That is another significant question. These cultural insights typically help L&D professionals position their interventions for success. Now let's quickly look into the foundations of diagnostic questionnaires. When you look into the diagnostic questionnaires, they are foundational tools in strategic planning and implementation of learning and development initiatives. So both planning and implementation dimension is taken care of by the diagnostic questionnaire. So they provide structured, data-driven insights that help organizations make informed decisions regarding skill development, regarding performance improvement, and even the future capability building. Let's understand diagnostic questionnaire in a more detailed fashion right from the definition. When you look into the definition and purpose, please note, a diagnostic questionnaire is a structured set of questions systematically designed to collect information from individuals or groups about the learning needs, about the skill levels, about the readiness to learn, behavioral tendencies, and preferred learning methods. So these questionnaires are typically administered before designing or delivering any L&D intervention, ensuring that the solutions are relevant, they are personalized, and they are evidence-based. So as defined by B&B 2003, the primary purpose of a diagnostic questionnaire, if you ask B&B 2003, is to inform decision-making on learning strategy, on design, on delivery by identifying gaps between the current and the desired states of knowledge, skill, and behavior. So these questionnaires, if you ask me, typically they serve as a diagnostic tool, much like a physician's initial assessment. So it does not offer the treatment, but if you ask me, it guides what treatment is needed. That information can be easily obtained. Further discussion on this will show us that the key diagnostic dimensions that are part of this diagnostic questionnaires will include aspects like current skill proficiency, awareness of job expectations, the confidence in role specific tasks, preference for learning styles or the modalities, and it also looks into some of the barriers to learning. It can be time, it can be motivation, it can be tech access, all these aspects typically. We'll also look into, in the foundational aspects, the role in the L&D cycle. Diagnostic questionnaires are integral to the broader L&D cycle, particularly in the early stages. So they are most commonly used in what we have already seen as the TNA. TNA is something which we have already discussed in the previous module, so I'm not going to invest much time here. Identifying gaps between actual performance and the expected performance. That's what TNA is, the training needs analysis. We have also seen some learning diagnostic patterns in the previous few sessions, which explore deeper factors such as mindset, motivation or environmental constraints. We also do look into some of the pre-intervention assessments, establishing baselines against which progress can be measured post-training. So their function is to bridge the gap between assumed needs and the actual needs. So thereby reducing the risk of designing training based on anecdotal evidence or managerial opinions alone. According to Watkins et al., see, if you look into the empirical research that's going on with respect to the diagnostic questionnaire, Watkins, Lay and Kaufman, 1998, effective L&D begins by, according to them, identifying and validating real performance gaps, not merely responding to perceived ones. So this distinction is vital. This is crucial. Without data from structured tools like diagnostic questionnaires, L&D programs risk becoming misaligned, overly generic or irrelevant to the actual challenges faced by the employees. When we look into the foundations of the diagnostic questionnaire, we are also looking into the typical advantages of diagnostic questionnaires. Diagnostic questionnaires offer a range of practical and strategic advantages. When you look into the scalability and cost effectiveness, this is one of the foremost advantage. They can be administered to large population simultaneously using digital platforms or learning management systems, making them ideal for geographically dispersed or hybrid teams. Then the objective and standardized aspects can be looked into. Like when designed with consistency, diagnostic questionnaires, they minimize bias and provide a reliable framework for comparison across departments, teams, or even roles. When we look into the advantages of the diagnostic questionnaires, we also have to understand the quantifiable insights. It provides quantifiable data, they yield quantifiable insights. Let's take an example. Let's say percentage of employees rating low confidence in a skill. That can be analyzed statistically and correlated with performance metrics or business KPIs. We also see that it reveals both skill and behavioral gaps. When we look into effective questionnaires, they assess both technical skills, be it like, let's say, some example being proficiency in Excel, and behavioral competencies. It can be like example be teamwork or resilience. So this dual focus ensures that training addresses not only what people do, but how they do it. It also enhances the learner voice and engagement. So involving learners in the diagnostic process helps surface their perspectives and creates a sense of ownership and involvement, which improves subsequent participation and learning retention. Now we'll look into the types and designs of diagnostic questionnaires for learning interventions. When we talk about diagnostic questionnaires, there is no doubt they are versatile tools that vary widely depending on their focus area, on the structural design of the questionnaire as such, and even the specific measurement tools that they employ. So understanding these variations help L&D professionals tailor the diagnostics to capture the most relevant data efficiently and meaningfully. So when we look into the types, we have to start with the focus area. So with respect to the focus area, diagnostic questionnaires can be categorized by specific learning and development dimensions that they aim to explore. So each type serves a unique purpose and targets different aspects of learning needs and organizational context. You look into the skills inventory as a type, you'll see that the purpose is to map the current technical or functional skills held by the employees. So it helps identify gaps and plan targeted skill building programs accordingly. Example could be a survey listing software skills. It could be Excel, Python with self-rated proficiency. That could be a typical skills inventory part. When you look into the second aspect, first being skills inventory, second type would be competency assessment. It measures proficiency in core behavioral competencies such as leadership, communication, or teamwork, often aligned with the competency framework. So an example could be a questionnaire rating behaviors like, let's say, one for conflict resolution or decision making effectiveness. That could be a typical example for a competency assessment. The third type would be learning style preference. So learning style preference identifies preferred modes of learning specifically. So it could be visual, auditory, reading, writing, or kinesthetic. We have discussed all these modes of learning across different modules. To personalize the delivery methods, we would need this learning style preference as a type. So the most common is the work, that is visual, auditory, read, write, and the kinesthetic questionnaire. Other significant type here would be the training readiness scale. Training readiness scale, the purpose is to assess an individual's openness, motivation, and perceived barriers to engage with learning programs. So let's take an example questions on willingness to invest time in training or confidence in ability to learn new skills. That can be part of the training readiness scale. We also do have a different type of organizational cultural scan. Now when you look into the purpose of this, it is to understand the climate around learning within the organization, including attitudes towards development, leadership support, and obstacles. So as an example, you will have items measuring the perceptions of support for learning and development opportunities in the workplace. This is typically with respect to the classification based on focus area. Now based on structure, we have the structural design of a questionnaire that typically influences the nature and depth of the data collected. So we have essentially three primary structural types that are commonly used in the L&D diagnostics. One being close-ended. When you talk about close-ended, it includes all the fixed response options like, let's say, multiple choice, Likert scales, rating scales, etc. These are ideal for quantifiable, easily analyzable data. So whatever is quantifiable is easy to be collected in a close-ended type of questionnaire. Let's take an example, rate your confidence in data analysis on a scale of 1 to 5, a typical Likert scale here. Then we have the second type by structure, which is open-ended. Open-ended consists of free text questions allowing respondents to express thoughts, their feelings, or elaborate on specific issues. So these provide rich qualitative insights and uncover nuances and emotional context. The third type would be an hybrid approach, a hybrid which combines closed and open-ended questions, a combination of both. This design is effective for capturing both quantitative data and deeper qualitative explanation. So we see a mix of both, especially in behaviorally focused diagnostics where the context matter. So after discussing by focus area, by structure, we will go to the common tools and the question formats. When we look into operationalizing the diagnostic questionnaires effectively, L&D professionals utilize a range of question formats and tools that align with the objectives of the assessment. You'll see Likert scales. These are widely used rating scales for the people who don't know. Most of us, we already know. You venture into or you go into a mall, you will be suddenly caught and given a survey or maybe a market research. So all the questions might be on a scale of 1 to 5 or a scale of 1 to 7. So these are widely used rating scales on a scale of from 1 to 5, not confident to very confident. How do you rate your ability to use data visualization tools? An example could be that. Then there are self-assessment checklists. Respondents check off skills or behaviors they currently possess or engage in. So, these are useful for quick skills inventories or typically the competency mapping. We check all the software tools you are proficient in. So, that type of a questionnaire will essentially be the self-assessment checklist. Then there are semantic differential scales. Semantic differential scales ask respondents to rate themselves between two bipolar adjectives or bipolar continuum. Please rate your current comfort with public speaking on a scale from confident to, let's say, unsure. So, confident at one end and unsure being other end. So, this could be one of the typical aspect, or maybe from confident to not at all confident. So, that would be a semantic differential scale. Then you have behavioral frequency checklist. These measures how often specific behaviors or practices are performed. An example could be, let's say, how often do you participate in team meetings, with options like never, rarely, sometimes, often, always. So, that would be a variation type of scale. So, again please note, well designed diagnostic tools make the invisible visible. Now, coming back to designing effective diagnostic questionnaire, we will go through some of the step-by-step process that are involved. The moment you say about designing effective diagnostic questionnaires, it's all about creating diagnostic questionnaires that yield accurate, actionable insights, which is critical step in a learning and development process. So, a well-designed questionnaire, if you ask me, not only gathers relevant data, but also engages respondents and respects their context, ensuring the data quality and utility. So, if you look into the step-by-step process, we start with clarifying the diagnostic goals. When you look into clarity of goals or clarifying the diagnostic goals, before drafting questions itself, you clearly define what the questionnaire aims to diagnose. Are you assessing, let's say, some aspects like skill gaps, be it technical or behavioral competencies, whatever it is, that's not relevant, but what it is measuring. Learning motivation or readiness, or is it going for behavioral patterns affecting performance, or is it looking for organizational learning culture or climate. So, a focused goal prevents a scattergun approach and ensures every question adds value to the overall diagnostic objective. For instance, if identifying readiness for digital learning is the goal, questions about digital literacy and motivation becomes the priorities. Second aspect would be to define the target audience. Understanding who will respond is essential for tailoring language, question complexity and delivery mode altogether. So, what is the job role and educational background? Are there language or literacy considerations? Will the questionnaire be completed on mobile, desktop or paper? What is the mode? Tailoring to the audience increases engagement and data accuracy, and this is what BNB 2003 says. The third aspect or the step to go forward would be to choose the question type. The question type should align with the diagnostic goals and the respondent characteristics, like let's say rating scales, Likert or numeric. They suit more of quantifying skills and confidence levels. Open-ended questions, on the other hand, uncover barriers, attitudes and nuanced perspectives. So, multiple choice or checklist facilitate quick identification of competencies or preferences. So, combining these types can balance depth and ease of analysis. Ensure validity and reliability. This would be the next step. Reliability is all about the questions should consistently measure the same construct across different respondents and times. Whereas validity would be questions must measure what they intend to. So, I will take 10 seconds of my time in actually explaining to you, to whoever is not aware of the validity and reliability part. The moment you come across statistics, especially with respect to questionnaire development, there are two terms, reliability and validity. So reliability, as we know, is a functional definition. So typically, let's take a device. Let's say a device which measures maybe weight. So it gives the same weight for the same person in different contexts. Let's say you put it in Guwahati, you put it in Delhi, you put it in Mumbai, you put it in Chennai, you put it in Chandigarh, you put it in Jammu, you put it in Cochin, whatever be the place, you will get exactly the same measure because the person or whatever you are measuring is constant. So that is reliability. Across different contexts, you have to get the same value. So when you are looking into a questionnaire also, you are measuring something, you have to get the same thing for the same aspect across different contexts. Now another significant aspect here is validity. Validity means what it is supposed to measure, is it measuring? That is the understanding of validity. Let's say a weighing machine should be able to give the weight of whatever substance or product or person or whatever be the entity that is there. So whether it is doing what it is supposed to do, that is validity. So a weighing machine should be able to give the weight wherever it is, but with respect to the purpose it has to serve the purpose. So many a time people make a mistake with respect to reliability versus validity. So I thought I will give you an example and make you understand that when you design effective diagnostic questionnaires, you have to understand that we are looking certainly into latent variables. And when we are looking into latent variables, the problem is we cannot see them. They are not tangible. They cannot be touched or understood. So how to make them tangible is to make them measure through scales. And the scales, for that reason, it needs to be reliable. It needs to be valid. It should serve the purpose what it is supposed to, and it should be constant and consistent across different contexts. Another significant aspect when you look into designing effective questionnaire is the pilot and the refinement part. Before full deployment, test the questionnaires on a sample similar, maybe a small sample, similar to the target audience. So typically, pilot helps in identifying confusing or redundant questions and removing them. So assess average completion time, that also will be a plus point of pilot study, and it also helps to check technical functionality if there is any problem. So feedback from pilots informs necessary revisions and improves the data quality. Other significant step would be to use technology tools. Leverage all the digital platforms for ease of distribution, real-time collection and automated data analysis specifically. So common tools include Google Forms, Microsoft Forms, Qualtrics, SurveyMonkey and others. Most of our research happens through Qualtrics, and when you look into the advanced platforms may offer branching logic or anonymity options and even data export for deeper analysis. So technology also allows integration with LMS or talent management system to align diagnostics with broader HR analytics altogether. Next significant step is to ensure confidentiality, especially for questions on sensitive topics, let's say like psychological safety or leadership fallback, like psychological safety or leadership feedback or personal motivation. They should ensure that anonymity or confidentiality statements are there. There should be proper securing of the data storage part. Ethical use of data and transparency with respondents is also vital. So this builds trust, it builds honest responses, it encourages honest responses and enhances the data validity altogether. Now, having looked into the entire set of steps for defining and designing effective diagnostic questionnaires, now let's look into the best practices and ethical considerations in diagnostic questionnaires. Effective and ethical use of diagnostic questionnaires is vital to ensure that data collection is not only accurate and actionable, but also respectful of participant rights and organizational integrity. So if you look into the best practice and ethical considerations I have listed down, tabulated them, and again, please note this is not an exhaustive list, but I tried to put maximum data into it. The first practice could be use neutral, bias-free language specifically. When you look into questions, that should be worded in a way that avoids leading respondents toward a particular answer or creating any discomfort for the matter. So, neutral phrasing reduces response bias and promotes honest, reliable data. Let's take an example. Instead of asking, let's say, how excellent was the training session? You can use, how would you rate the training session? Very simple. So, there is no leading question there. You are not actually putting in that excellent word intentionally. So, how excellent was a training session? You can always imagine what the answer would be. But when you put how would you rate the training session, it can be more objective. Avoid emotionally charged or judgmental terms that might influence answers. The second aspect is to avoid double-barrel questions. This is significant. Double-barrel questions, they ask about two issues at once, confusing respondents and reducing the clarity of respondents. So, please, sincere advice, if you are looking into the diagnostic questionnaires, designing them, avoid the double-barrel questions. An example could be, let's say, how satisfied are you with the trainer and content? So, basically, it should be split into two questions. One about the trainer and another about the content. The moment you ask how satisfied are you with the trainer and content, let's say I am a person who is having a different opinion with respect to the trainer and a very different opinion with respect to the content, I am unable to answer this particular question because the question itself is mixed up. So, this is a typical reason why we need to avoid double-barrel questions. So, this improves data precision, it improves interpretability. Please note, please avoid double-barrel questions. Other significant practice would be to keep it short and focused. Questionnaires should be designed to be completed within, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes to minimize the respondent fatigue and dropout rates. Now, many a time we see lengthy 30-minute questionnaire, 40-minute, 50-minute questionnaire. Nobody is going to answer that sincerely. So, long or overly complex surveys risk low completion rates and superficial answers. So, prioritize the essential questions aligned directly to the diagnostic goals. The fourth aspect would be to provide feedback or summary reports. So, where appropriate, sharing feedbacks or aggregated summary reports with participants can increase engagement and demonstrate the value of their input. So, this also builds trust, it builds transparency between L&D teams and learners, encouraging future participation. We will also consider the ethical considerations in the diagnostic questionnaire. When we look into the ethical consideration, we have to always enforce voluntary participation. Respondents should always have the option to decline participation without any negative consequences. Consent must be informed. Participants understand what the questionnaire entails and how their data will be used. These three aspects you should never forget when you are looking into the ethical considerations. So, this respects autonomy and essentially fosters the ethical research practice. Other significant aspect when ethical considerations and diagnostic questionnaires are considered is anonymity and confidentiality. Protecting respondent identity and data privacy is crucial, especially when questions touch on sensitive topics like, let's say, psychological safety or leadership feedback. We also have to look into the transparency on data use. Anonymity encourages honest responses, while confidentiality data is stored securely and used responsibly. So, when anonymity is not possible, explain clearly how privacy will be protected. Now, let's look into transparency on data use. Be upfront with participants about why data is being collected, how it will be analyzed, who will access it, and how findings will be applied within the organization. So, transparency helps build trust and ensures ethical compliance with data protection laws like GDPR or similar regulations. Maybe it's European Commission 2018 or all similar regulations that are existing today. And finally, avoid manipulations or leading questions. Questions should not be designed to manipulate responses or steer participants towards predetermined conclusions. So, diagnostic process must remain objective and neutral to genuinely reflect the learning needs and gaps. For example, avoid loaded questions such as, don't you agree that training is always helpful? So, what will you say? You will always have an answer which is yes. So, it is a case for you to actually avoid the leading questions per se. So, when you are looking into the ethical considerations in diagnostic questionnaires, these are the critical aspects which has to be considered. So, in this session, to conclude, we have looked into the diagnostic questionnaires typically. What are the different considerations we need to have? What are the different steps we need to follow? What are the best practices we should actually adapt and adopt? These were some of the aspects which we discussed in today's session. If you look into the previous session of this module, we have looked into the diagnostic questionnaire with respect to the different types of management and what it is with respect to the people and the position. But today, we looked into the diagnostic questionnaire itself, what it is, how we can develop it, what are the aspects we need to consider when we develop it. And I will conclude with the singular explanation of reliability and validity again. Let's look into this from a different angle. If we are developing a diagnostic questionnaire and it is not serving the purpose it is supposed to serve, then what is the use? This is typically why we need to have a certain bit of idea with respect to the development of diagnostic questionnaires. Similarly, when we have developed a diagnostic questionnaire, it should not have a bias. Let's say person A, you get a result. The same diagnostic questionnaire, it should have consistency with respect to person A across different contexts. So, you will now appreciate and acknowledge why reliability and validity is essential. So, this is what typically makes the diagnostic questionnaire more robust and more purposeful. You look into diagnostic questionnaires, if you want to have a clear objective data, please make sure you follow all the typical aspects which we discussed today. That would be the end of diagnostic questionnaire discussion as on today's lecture. Thank you for listening to me patiently. We'll come up with more details of learning and development in the next module. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.